episode 8. We are recording on the 7th of October 2018, which is a fair bit before our actual release date of the 16th of October. The reason why we're recording ahead of time is for both myself, Elliot Page, and my lovely co-host, Mr. Andy Hanley. Say hi, Andy.
Hello, everyone.
This is a hell month. More for Andy than I. Andy, as you can hear, is bearing up quite well under the whole stress of the whole thing.
Yeah. We'll check back in a month and see whether I can make coherent sentences still. That will be an interesting challenge for all concerned.
Well, if you're in a bad way when it comes to SLA, I don't know, I'll figure something out. Maybe I'll sort of like pump you full of, I don't know, whiskey? I don't know, shrug.
Yeah, that will probably work by that point.
How about whiskey and pancakes? I think that gets my vote. Even if you don't want it, I'll have them, sod it.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, completely off topic, there's a new pancake place opening in Glasgow this month, so pancakes are on my mind a surprising amount at the moment, so that's very topical.
Oh, that sounds great. Oh, man, Tesco here used to do pancakes in its menu for dead cheap, but I think I was the actual only person eating them, so now they're not on the menu anymore. Like, what the hell?
I always hate those moments where there's something that clearly you are the only person in that supermarket that buys it, and then it kind of goes away, and you realise, like, oh, that was just me then. Yeah,
I was the pancake man, as it turns out. Enough about pancakes. Let's talk about manga. Also, novellas, as it turns out. This is your fortnightly look at manga with a focus on joint discussion. We're going to try and keep the show tight to a nice little length to prevent it from ballooning into another everything and everything podcast. As always, we will announce our next series ahead of time, so you can also read in and join in if you want to. We've had some great responses and questions about the things we're going to be talking about this week. First and foremost, we launched a Patreon just last week at the time of recording, and massive thank you to everyone who has looked at it, considered it, and even those who have signed up especially, because now, as a result of our very kind pledges, we are now sorted for hosting. That's one thing now completely off of our minds and taken care of, which is a small but very important step, and also, frankly, very gratifying. You know, podcasts are an amazing medium. I love them dearly, but you do often feel like you're yelling into the void. So thank you very much, everyone who has signed up. If you haven't, maybe consider it. I don't know, from $1 a month, you can get a bonus episode every month. And we're going to be talking about that. And also people get to vote on what we talk about for the bonus episode, which, you know, interactivity, it's 2018, fun times. So again, thank you very much for everyone who has signed up for that. Without further ado, we'll actually get to the manga like promised. So first and foremost, we are going first to our returning champions feature, which I thought we weren't going to have anything this week. But Andy, you just had to remind me that I bought volume 6 of The Promised Neverland and forgot to read it. And so I had to basically sit down this afternoon to burn through it so I could talk with you about it. I mean, frankly, I didn't have to, but when you mentioned Promised Neverland Volume 6 in a DM to me, along with some rather excited noises, I was like, crap, I got to read this, ain't I?
Yeah, so, I mean, I was going to say, like, I feel like I've done you a solid there. That is time well spent.
No. I'm not going to complain, but no, please, Andy, take it away.
Yeah, so, I mean, we've talked about Promised Neverland a couple of times, like early on in the life of this podcast. We looked at the first volume, and then we burned through the remaining volumes in pretty short order a few weeks or so later. And then, I mean, this whole kind of starting thing, like, it's kind of your fault, because I think we both thought that Volume 6 was coming out in November, and then you suddenly shouted at me like, no, it's out now.
I thought it was out in November. I swear to goodness. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we were maybe looking at like the physical release date, because I know that's like the end of October, so that's maybe what happened there. But so you sent me that reminder, and so like this weekend came around, and I very much made sure that I set aside some time to take a look at this, because as we have discussed previously, this series has been real good. Although, like, I think we definitely had some caveats after Volume 5 of, like, you know, this is kind of a new dimension for the story, and it hadn't quite settled into any kind of, you know, rhythm or cadence for us to really feel comfortable with what direction it was headed in. And in a way, it seems as if that particular chunk of the story was a little bit transitory, really, because, I mean, Volume 6 is basically... It's quite a sea change in a sense, because all of the volumes previously have been very much kind of cat and mouse, kind of, you know, the thrill of the chase, if you like, and kind of trying to escape from malevolent forces. Whereas Volume 6 is very much focused on world building in a very literal sense. Like it takes the time to almost literally sit down and say, okay, so what is the state of this world? Like there's been a lot of kind of theories and assumptions that characters have kind of dropped in around what's going on in the wider world outside of this weird kind of orphanage / farm that the main cast were initially trapped in, but like nobody's actually known for sure. But then Volume 6 kind of comes and fills in a lot of the gaps and kind of gives you the lay of the land, you know, in very much in terms of what is going on, what the actual reality is. Of course, it leaves a few things unspoken, and there's a very clear sense of like, wait, these characters haven't been told everything yet. So there's clearly more to be said, but it's very much a sense of like giving you the big picture in terms of this is what the actual world is. It kind of moves some of the goalposts as a result in terms of what this group of kids who have escaped, you know, needs to do, and you know what that means for what they want to do and what they've planned in the past. And it has some nice little twists at the end as well. Like there are some characters that crop up in this volume, and it kind of shows like one of the smart things that this series does, because it lays out a bunch of facts about these kind of characters and, you know, their motivations and their belief system effectively. But it also it kind of lures the reader into making assumptions based around that. And you kind of don't even realize you've made those assumptions until it kind of taps you on the shoulder towards the end and be like, actually, you just kind of assumed this thing, and this is actually slightly different to what you were probably imagining. So it does some smart stuff like that. It's also kind of at the point now where I think because of the way the series has run up to this point, it actually doesn't have to work that hard in terms of kind of leaving the reader questioning stuff, because you've kind of already reached a point where you're on the same level of paranoia as the cast. Like whenever anyone or anything turns up, like you're instantly questioning, like, who are you? What is your motivation? Like, what are you hiding, if anything, etc., etc. And so it kind of it almost it can be a bit low effort with that stuff because it's just got that drilled into you at this point. But no, I really enjoyed this volume. Like, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's moved it on to another stage of the story. Like by the end of it, all of the world building stuff is really strong and interesting, and it kind of, you know, it sets things out in a really fascinating way that I'm looking forward to seeing it explore. And you know, it continues to work well with the characters that it has. Like they continue to all play to their strengths. So overall, yeah, like I burned through this in no time at all, and yet again, I absolutely loved this volume of it.
Yeah, I feel like the one most painful part of this volume is that we now have to wait for volume 7 to come along, God knows when.
Yeah.
I'm almost tempted to find out if I can just buy a bunch of Shonen Jump volumes to get caught up fully, but then I'll be jonesing even harder for weekly releases. So, you know, that's just, you know, sticking more drugs in the van. Yeah, I fully echo what you said. I mean, the thing in particular for me, like we say, at the end of volume 5, I had quite a few qualms about where the series was going because of, like, the first volume sets out the structure and then it goes through that, and it reached a slightly uncomfortable place where the series, as a series, it works best under certain boundaries and constraints and constriction of the characters. Like, I feel like that's when it works best, is when, you know, you basically have a bunch of very interesting characters like intellectually shoulder charging a wall that won't budge, and it's like, okay, well, let's see how this goes. And in volume 6, they do quite a lot of very useful segmentation of who knows what, who sees what, who believes what, who is concerned about what, you know, different actors on the stage, and makes it a lot more broad. But it also does a very smart thing of just snipping off certain questions with the world building you mentioned, where it kind of prunes the questions I was not very excited about, if that makes sense. Like, certain questions about the state of the world and what the goal of the characters gets really carefully readjusted, and that really helps it, because, you know, at the start you have a very strict sort of dilemma, and once they escape, once certain things happen, it's like, okay, well, what happens now? Like, whether shall their energy go? And now it's set back up, and it's penned the characters in again, which is nice, because it's like, okay, there's a thing to strive for here. And of course, the last page of this volume is like a massive sort of like, okay, this is a big deal. let's see where this goes, because you've already had quite a lot of uncertainty plugged into the characters, any characters you see, which is very helpful. Like, because this volume introduces more thoroughly a pair of new characters who are fascinating, and like you say, like you make assumptions, but then you're falling into the traps of the series, and it challenges you. I wondered what you thought about the I forget his name, but the sort of taller male hunter that you get introduced to. What do you think of his sort of like parting shots at the reader almost, when he's like sort of mentioning his motivations?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed that twist. I mean, it's kind of one of those things, like looking back on it, it's like, maybe I should have seen that coming. But yeah, I don't know. It kind of works and fits in with the characters as they've been built at that point, because that guy is very much set up as like, everything that he is acting upon is based upon his faith and his belief system. And then like when you actually slot in what he kind of brings to the table at the end of that volume, it's like, oh yeah, that all totally fits in with everything he's saying. Like at no point has he lied, and there's no kind of plot hole in terms of any of that stuff. But it's interesting. It's a nice kind of little like chilling twist on that world to kind of further complicate things in terms of that side of things. And yeah, I know I really liked that. That was quite a, maybe powerful is not quite the word, but it was quite an intense little moment of just like, oh right, this is how things really are here. Yeah,
I agree. I really like that, because it also helps keep doors open for more interesting kinks in the tail later on, of like, okay, the author knows enough not to just shut everything down when you can add a lot of texture and interest. And like, characters have been shown to lie. And so who knows how much was truthful when they are already obscuring truth from each other as confidence, and also to the rest of the cast. And also I do like the fact that like it's taking time, but more of the cast are coming into their own, and they're not primary characters, but a lot of the secondary characters like Gilda and such, they will stick their oar in at times, like Emma being the main character, who nearly run herself dead, almost like run herself ragged trying to shoulder every burden that she could get her mitts on, basically gets taken aside and told, look, don't overdo it. Like, you're no good to anyone if you freaking kill yourself. And it's like, oh, like, this is important. This is important. And this is an important character moment, because it's like, being told by her friends and family, like, Emma, you can't do everything. Like, I know you're the protagonist, but like, knock it off. So yeah. I really enjoyed that. That was a really lovely piece of like, oh no, and also like the one thing I like about the series, which I kind of hit me this volume, is that it's not like a cycle, and it's not, you don't like have the designated suspicious person. Like, everyone has their blind spots and stuff they want to trust, because they want to trust it or hope to trust it, or that's what they want to see. But the series will take turns having someone go, wait a second, and raise their finger. And that's the thing I like, is that, it's not like it's not like there's the one killjoy, like deadpan person who's like, not so sure. You have different people coming in at different times and going, hang on a second, hang on. So that really helps keep it interesting, and also makes it, it doesn't feel, even though it is kind of doing the same kind of cadence to a lot of its plot events, it doesn't feel like it. And that's meant in a really positive manner, honestly, because it's like, oh, this feels more naturalistic. You don't just have the one smarty pants who keeps poking their finger in and getting annoying.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at the early volumes of the series, it felt like it could so easily have been like, oh, here are the three smartest kids, and then here is a medley of other characters that really don't matter and may not even get names. Whereas here, yes, there are still kind of clearly the major characters, but yeah, like you say, some of the other characters become important to the point where, they're not getting a massive amount of kind of screen time, as it were, but they're still really important. And even kind of some of the lesser kind of characters, it still feels like it is important that they're there. I mean, there's a really nice little moment in this volume where Emma kind of goes through like some of the other characters that are kind of no longer appearing in the series, and just kind of like goes through and just like, oh yeah, like, these people are still important to me. And it's kind of that's kind of so much of what powers the series. It feels like everybody is important here. It's not like you have kind of the expendable sort of, red shirt characters, effectively. Like, everybody here is important and has a part to play.
Yeah. If nothing else, the loss of any one of them would probably make everyone cry. Because, there's a lot of powerful Emma moments in this volume that make it worthwhile alone. Also, the revelation that Ray can cook really well.
which is fantastically. I took that as one of the images we may use on social media, simply because, like, one of the weird things that is maybe been going on throughout the series, but I noticed more in this volume, is that there are lots of really kind of over the top sound effects on panels, and that was one of them where Ray reveals that he can cook, just with the sound effect of boom, and I can kind of imagine him just like dropping the mic. It's like, yeah, I can cook. Bang.
Well, he has a really sour face when he's saying it, so yes, boom.
So that was real good. And I will say, while you're talking about emotional moments, like this won't mean anything to anybody who hasn't read the series up to this point, but the reveal about the flower just absolutely like caught in my throat, and the way it's shown, like in terms of like the artwork and paneling, is really good. But that was just like a intake of breath, like, oh whoa, kind of moment that is really, really smart.
I think that, it's really smart as well, because it also lays that entire thing to bed. Like, there's no more questions about what the hell that thing is, because also the flower is like one of the most powerful initial images of the series, because it's like, bam, there it is.
And it keeps coming back as well.
Well, yeah, and also when they do explain it, it's like, here it is. Here's what the point of this is. And you're just like, shit, like, it is really powerful. It's really chilling. I'm actually getting chills thinking about it again. Thanks, Andy. So between me and you, and very quick mention that this is like a mid-series spoiler, I suppose. So if you want to skip on about 30 seconds, so apologies. But I know this is foolish. I know it's wrong, Andy, but I still expect Norman to turn up again.
Yeah.
Like, my God. Oh, I know he's probably very dead, but oh man, come on, give him back.
Yeah, it's also one of the harsh things about this series is like when you get the character introduction stuff at the start of each volume, and they just cross out the dead people. It's just like, no, gone, and it's like, yeah, I still have that exact same thing. It's like, well, we haven't seen it with our own eyes, so maybe.
I don't dare to hope. Andy. I really don't. No. If he did turn up, I'd be really happy. And also, I know he would come along with some insane explanation of what the hell happened to him.
Yeah, that's just it. Like, if they can write that well, like, I would be all for it. Like, I wouldn't want them to do it and to be one of those moments where the series jumps the shark. But yeah, like, it's kind of hard not to hold out that. Okay, maybe it could happen.
Yeah. Oh well. Well, I have lots of faith. Now they've set stakes again. I feel very happy to keep reading this series. Also looking forward to the anime, although I barely have time to watch anime right now. But
really interested to see how that turns out. And my final thing is I will give kudos to the unexpected cameo of Jammy Dodgers in this volume.
Oh yeah, man!
It's like I was not expecting to see that in Promised Neverland.
If only they had party rings. God, party rings in anime. Okay, cool. So, man, we went long, but yeah, Promised Neverland still gets our seal of approval, I guess.
Indeed.
Jeez. Cool. So, moving on to this week's stuff, and man, we picked a pair of barn burners to cram in a week of gap. So, first and foremost, if you don't mind, is my pick. And this is the newly digitally available A Bride's Story by Kaoru Mori, published by Yen Press. It is currently at 9 volumes released in the in English speaking, and 10 volumes in Japan. It's currently ongoing both here and in Japan originally. You can buy it in physical hardback volumes and now available digitally on most storefronts. I personally would recommend Kobo because it's cheaper than anywhere else. I don't know what Yen Press is doing there, but I'm happy to throw money at them through there, frankly, because it's cheaper. So yeah, this is Kaoru Mori is a manga I have kind of an almost stupid amount of respect for and would kind of bow if I ever saw her, which would be highly embarrassing for both me and them. So Kaoru Mori is amazing, and she previously drew and wrote and produced the manga Emma, a Victorian romance, which was adapted into 2 seasons of anime and was basically about a like star-crossed lovers, upstairs, downstairs, Victorian maid meets master love story. And it was like painstakingly, excruciatingly carefully researched and kind of intersected with a lot of Kaoru Mori's predilections and love of maids, like real deal maids, not frigging cafe maids. And a bride's tale, a bride's story. I keep trying to call it the bride's tale. It's really not. And a bride's story picks up on some of that still because it is another like tour de force of Kaoru Mori drawing her hand off and researching the ever-loving bejesus out of everything, which really comes through. But a synopsis. So a bride's story picks up where it looks into a pair of characters, Amir and Karluk. They live on the edge of the Caspian Sea around the turn of the 19th century, I believe. And so they live in basically Asia Minor, I suppose you'd call it, sort of the Caspian Sea, Caucasus sort of region over there. Fascinating sort of plains and such, Silk Road style area. There's been a recent series by Joanna Lumley traveling the Silk Road, which honestly been pretty good. So if you can stomach Joanna Lumley mugging at the camera, totally worth a watch. And so basically this girl, Amir, who's 20, gets married off to the 12-year-old Karluk, who is the current scion of of a nearby family, living about a few days horse ride away from her like home nomadic village. And it's basically comes in with Amir turning up. They have a wedding on page 2, and then basically from there it's her settling into her strange new life, and getting used to things, sort of finding her place in the extended family she's now in, getting used to the fact that, she's got a 12-year-old husband, a groom even, and just, it's a very slow pan across this sort of situation. And there's storm clouds on the horizon because there's some tension around the fact that Amir's tribe somewhat regret marrying her off and sending her away when there's other stakes and other sort of like crazy dynastic nonsense to be going on. And so, yeah, it's that sort of thing where it has a lot of very slow chapters. There's one entire chapter which is about one of the youngest children in the family who is like just falls in with a woodcarver. And it's dope because you just have this kid hanging around this woodcarvers and you get these amazing, amazing detailed artwork of people carving wood, like support beams and stuff. Looks dope. And yeah, so the most important thing I can mention is that the art is absolutely absurd. Even in later chapters towards the end of the volume, once it's calmed down from the sheer sort of hedonistic heights of chapter 1, it looks amazing. Like the art, the detail, the slavish devotion to design, the clothing of the characters, like the sheer historicity of it, and also the subtle differences between the different characters, their different stations, their ages, their gender, their roles in the local family. It's amazing. It's really beautiful. And it also is imbued with an amazing sense of life. Like one of the most amazing things in this for me, and I kept seeing, and I just appreciate it for being difficult to do, is whenever a character turns and they have earrings and you can see that the earrings are in mid motion and their individual parts are moving with them. And it's not just like speed lines or, motion lines. It is just like a character in mid head turn, the earrings kind of following them. It's fascinating. It's an amazing piece of just really elegant drawing. And you've got horses, you've got horseback archery as part of life as a formerly nomadic person, and a very sort of very earnest sort of look at the calm tensions of trying to fit in with a new family, feeling a bit out of it, being the naive but also the cast off, because Amir is, it's agreed upon at one point that she's a bit old to be a bride. She's 20. I mean, getting up there. And so everyone, there's a lot of tension around that societally. And the one thing I'll say about it certainly at the moment is that Amir and Karluk, the main pair, are kind of the most bland of most of the cast because everyone else mostly bounces off of them at the moment. But they're starting to actually like show themselves and have a bit more sort of place. Amir towards the end of the volume definitely has her moments. So really good. And, Kaoru Mori can draw people, and the amount of, I feel the one thing they've kind of improved a lot has been the expressivity of their faces. Like characters will, have these wonderful expressions and wide open faces. It's wonderful. So yeah, really enjoying it. A lot of the characters are really good fun. The art, as I say, is like knock you down with a feather, absurd. Like you can see why it got a hardback release on nice big paper, because hoo boy. I'm reading it on my big 10-inch tablet, and yeah, it looks real nice. So yeah, sorry I went long, Andy. I feel like I do this every single week. But So what did you think of it, Andy? I've kind of gushed endlessly here. So
yeah, so I mean, to start with, like, I'm absolutely with you on the artwork. Like, it is incredible, it is sumptuous, and I mean, you were talking about that whole chapter about the guy kind of making the railings and banisters, etc. Like, I've never before have I seen a manga that has like basically a 3-page spread of just like, hey, look at this sweet banister, and it's just like, okay, like, you have drawn this so well that it is well deserving of those 3 pages. So go for it, knock yourself out. And there is so much confidence in that artwork as well. Like the thing that kind of blew me away in terms of the confident artistry of it is the very first page, because it's 3 panels. There is no text, but it tells you so much of the setup of that series without saying a single word. And it's stuff that it all kind of goes back to, regarding kind of the marriage, the age difference between the 2 characters, kind of the setting and time period. But actually, they could probably have skipped all of that, because that first page tells you all of that just like bang, without any kind of effort or any confusion, and it just like, it looks great, and it just communicates everything that it needs to, and kind of the core premise of that series just so effortlessly.
Yeah, I'm definitely want to reinforce effortlessly. Yeah. Like, that's a real good word for it, even though that Karen Mori probably spent like weeks reading up about it, because she's a massive dork in that way. Yeah. By her own like author's note at the end.
Yeah, I sort of assumed that was what the afterward was going to be like, and it exactly was. So yeah, that was pretty cool. But yeah, like, again, like you say, the kind of the movement of both objects and people is really good. Also, I mean, the bit where Amir is hunting, like, there's just a fantastic kind of series of panels of her just kind of hunting with bow and arrow on this horse, and it's just like, the movement and the way she kind of swoops down to pick up this rabbit that she shot is just like so acutely observed that, like, that stuff, I could just kind of luxuriate and sublimate myself in that all day long, because that stuff is really excellent, which is kind of interesting to me, because I've never read any of Karen Mori's stuff before. In terms of her artwork, I've only really seen like the covers of stuff that she's worked on. And none of that has ever really caught me. I feel like she's maybe one of those artists that doesn't make the transition to color so well.
No, yeah,
it's never really kind of worked for me. But like, seeing it kind of properly within this volume, just like, oh yeah, okay, I see why she is kind of lauded for her talent, because it looks amazing.
Yeah, when she works in color, it generally kind of subsumes a lot of detail, and it looks nice, but it looks somewhat flat. But in black and white is when, even just seeing characters in normal dress is, blast your hair off, sort of.
Yeah, and speaking of normal dress, like, who is that dude with the glasses in this series? Is he a time traveler? Because he looks like he's come out of a completely different era.
So this is from me knowing about the series a little more, and also, frankly, looking at the Wikipedia page. He is Henry Smith. He is an anthropologist who is hanging out at the family's house, because basically they're the only ones who don't think he should be run out of. But he gets his own time later on. But yeah, he's just hanging out with them at the moment.
Yeah, because
he's like homestay sort of thing.
Yeah, because it's a really weird kind of unspoken thing in that first volume. Like, I saw him like named in kind of like the little kind of sort of family tree thing at the end, but it's just like, because he's just like, everyone else is in this incredible kind of get up and kind of traditional garb of these tribes, and there's just this dude kind of in slacks and a shirt wearing glasses. It's just like, it just felt like, it's the Doctor out of Doctor Who, and this is going to turn into some weird fan fiction at some point, because it's just like, he just seemed completely out of place compared to everybody else, and it just amused me somewhat whenever he turned up, because he always seemed to like know something that somebody else didn't as well. It's just like, have you come from the future?
Okay, yeah, that guy, I really like that character, but I also like the fact that he is not the point of view character, which would be really easy to do, or not easy, but it could be a thing you could do, just to short circuit a bunch of stuff and be like, oh look, we are this anthropologist. It's just like, no, he if anything is the weirdest character of the whole lot, because he's totally not really supposed to be there. And the thing I like about him, which kind of speaks to the era for me, and maybe I'm reaching here, but he does feel like a fish out of water, but also he constantly presupposes things and like tries to fit things in boxes, which, whenever he speaks, it's like, you kind of got it, mate, but like, it's just a goat amulet. What do you want? Like, don't overplay it. What is this? And, so that's what I really like about his character, is this weird creeping sort of like, he's just constantly keeps imposing ideas, and it's like, no, dude, it's an amulet. What do you want? Like, geez. I do like one of the little daughters the little daughter of the like aunt, who really likes hawks. Like, that's dope. Like, it's really fun just to have a character like just jump into a panel going like, oh, hawks, and it's like, oh yeah, hawks are cool, you know.
Yeah. So some of the stuff like that is really nice. But yeah, kind of, I don't know, beyond the artwork, I will say it felt like this was a series where the artwork was driving the story and not vice versa. It feels very much like a kind of a tale of like Kari Mori wanted to draw this thing this week, so therefore there was a chapter about it. Much like kind of the guy with the railings and the banisters. Like there's a whole bit about sheep herding where you had this great two page like spread of just a herd of sheep, but it just kind of felt like Kari Mori woke up one morning, was like, man, I really want to draw some sheep. So okay, here we go, and that often kind of felt like the deal there, as if it was very much like what the author wanted to draw.
Yeah, the cart-leading horse sort of thing.
Yeah, very much. And that was what kind of spurred on the narrative. And that was, I guess, if there was anything that kind of disappointed me about it, like it did sometimes feel like I was looking into a doll's house. Like it was all immaculate and incredible to look at. And I enjoyed looking at that stuff. But I kind of wished that the characters would move more, would have more of a story. And that's particularly true of Amir, because like you say, she's in an unusual place because, like, she's in a culture where, you know, the women of these tribes get married off as early as possible so that they can bear children and this, that, and the other. And she has made it to 20 and has basically eventually been palmed off because nobody else would take her. And in a way, like that amazing first page that I talked about, I almost wish that was the last page of the final volume, because I feel like all of Amir's interesting story is probably the build up to this moment. Like I really want to know what her situation was like with her tribe. Like why were there no other contenders for her hand in marriage? Like why was she kind of like the black sheep in that regard, especially given as like even Kari Mori in the afterward kind of admits like, yeah, I just found all the character traits I liked and just piled them all into this one character. So your typical thing in this kind of story is you'll have a character who, oh yeah, she's great apart from this one thing, like she's a tomboy or she's really belligerent or, you know, this, that, and the other. Whereas you kind of look at this character and she's, at times, she kind of feels like she's one step shy of a manic pixie dream girl. Like she's pretty much spot on in like everything that she does. And it's like, I really want to kind of know the story of like what it was like for her, seeing her kind of sisters and friends getting married off one by one while she was left on the shelf, quote unquote, and like why that is the case and what that meant for her relations with, you know, her family and her tribe, and how she felt when she was, you know, finally moved off to this tribe to marry somebody who was 8 years younger than her. Like there's so much I want to know about her and her thought processes and her feelings, and kind of none of that ever really even sort of begins to breach the surface of this volume.
Yeah, that's totally understandable, especially because, like, you know, it teases you at the end of the first chapter with her home tribe are not happy about it. And, you know, that seems to set something up. And then there's a rather sort of cool, but also like mid-flow expression of that when they come to take her away and get seen off. Although that scene is that's what I mean when I say that, like, maybe you agree that, like, you know, the rest of the family is way more developed than Amir is, because tons of stuff happens without her being there that's all way more interesting. And it's like, oh damn, and then, you know, no one talks to her about it when they come back because it's like, that'd be awkward.
Yeah. But I do need to shout out the badass grandma as well.
Oh, yeah, that's literally in my notes right here. Like hell yeah, granny. There you go, direct from my notes. But yeah, I feel like there's more to come of this aspect, and I think there's a reason why Amir is kind of quiet. I mean, hell, like my assumption at this point basically is that she was too independent, and so everyone got a bit. I mean, she already seems like a bit superwomanish, and maybe she was just a bit too imposing, and everyone else is like, don't really want to take her on. She's a bit much. So, but, you know, that's kind of the easy shortcut. The one thing to say about the series in general is that it doesn't just stick with Amir. Like, it is a series that is a succession of various brides and other stories in this sort of community expanded beyond this one village and such. So we're not just going to have like 10 volumes of Amir sort of, you know, on air sammering around sort of thing. So,
okay, that is interesting, yeah, because like that was one of my things when it comes to that inevitable like do I want to read more volumes of this? And like, there wasn't really anything that kind of caught me in to be like, apart from the artwork, like that was like, oh, I need to know what happens next in the story. But if it goes and explores other characters and, you know, maybe has, you know, more interesting things to say about them, then, you know, I could see that being more of a temptation to persist with it. But yeah, it's like that was the thing that kind of I came away with, like, this thing looks beautiful and I'll happily like just stare at it all day, but like, man, I kind of wish that it told me more about these gorgeous looking characters that you've so lovingly reproduced.
Yeah, I'm with you, but I'm also very much on the hook to continue reading it because I do love this artwork. And if you do want something that's Karumori art and her sort of slavish drawings, but also is a bunch of shorts, they've also released Everything and Something, which is her anthology. It's just a bunch of shorts that are one chapters. They were like special things drawn for the anthology she writes for. And some of them are literally just like, hey, I've drawn a lot of nice butts. Some of them have very short storylines. Some of them just basically are an excuse to draw nice derrieres, and that's kind of it. But yeah, God bless Karumori. Like, friggin' like, oh, amazing. But yeah, I am still at qualms with the storyline. I mean, the one event is when they go see Karluk's uncle, which is cool, but also you can tell there's something else there, but the series isn't going to give it to you straight away. So I'm interested to see what happens.
Fair enough.
But no, definitely on the hook for more. Really enjoying it. I'm just glad it's available digitally. Like, I've spent so long complaining about how Karumori stuff isn't available digitally, and finally it is. So
yeah. I mean, again, for me, it's one of those things where, like, you know, and not just from you, like, you know, it's a name of an author that comes up quite a lot, and it's, you know, something I've always wanted to explore, but it is that perhaps like dumb barrier of like, well, I don't want to buy physical books of this, like, because what if I don't like it? Whereas somehow having it digitally is okay. So like, having it just easily available and accessible like that, it definitely kind of closes the gap to like, okay, yeah, I can finally see what all the fuss is about.
Yep, that's what I think as well. So we have got a question in from Chiodori on Twitter. Thank you very much for the short notice question. So this is more for me because Andy hasn't read any Emma. Have you noticed any change in Mori's art style in Bride Story since her previous work, Emma? I would definitely say that she's become more confident, and her figures especially are far more sort of defined and assured. In particular, I think expressions are a lot more forward. I mean, to be fair, Emma is like set in Victorian England when everyone was like so wound up and self-denying that it was almost a mental condition of the entire country. And so having a lot more careful use of expression in a Bride Story is definitely something I enjoy. Like, even, you know, just characters like, you know, having eyes going wide is like, oh, that, you know, it's powerful. It's very well defined. I think that's definitely the main thing, as well as just all the knickknacks. Like, you have different, like, you know, dinner scenes with the family, and there's just like, you know, there's a goat kid in the mid foreground who's just hanging out, and, you know, it's like, oh, cool, a goat. So, you know, it all kind of flows together like that. So I feel for me, that's definitely the thing that stands out for Mori's art style. If she ever did a coffee table book, then oof, good lord. I'd break my no physical book law for that, that's for sure. Cool. So thank you for letting me harp on that, Andy, and for forcing it on you.
No, that's fine.
But no, so let's move on to your selection. Yes. Okay, Andy, this is yours now. You can go with, this is your bed to sleep in now.
Yeah. So my pick for this podcast was Last and First Idol, which is, I've been told at great pains to point out, is a collection of novellas. It is not a light novel. Please don't say that.
Yeah, we got told off. Sorry, Novel Club.
And so this is a series of 3 short stories, basically penned by Gingen Kusano. Man, I mean, you said that you were going to have this as like, I kind of stole one of your potential picks, and I wish I'd let you had it, because then you would have had to try and explain what the hell goes on in this book for the podcast. But apparently that's on me now. So I guess we should sort of start at the end with this, and start with the afterward, because basically the main story of this triumvirate of...
Oh, Andy, no, don't tell people that. Don't.
I feel like it's important. So it's...
No, I like it more as a sort of gut punch afterwards.
So I mean, I guess we could just leave it and say that it is the 50 Shades of Grey of kind of weird anime novels, because it started out as fan fiction. I won't say for what.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But it was a fan fiction that's basically had its characters been renamed to turn into a proper story in inverted commas. And it is the story of a girl called Mika Fruitsky, who basically, when she's born, she's kind of like constantly crying and wailing. Like, her parents try a multitude of things to like quieten her down, and ultimately it's kind of an idol concert coming on TV that actually shuts her up and kind of stops her crying and screaming. So from that point forth, they kind of just shower her in idol-related DVDs, etc., just to kind of keep her quiet. And of course, as a result, she turns into this girl who's just like absolutely obsessed with idols. And she kind of goes to a school to try and become an idol herself. She falls in with this other girl who is kind of your typical like perfect, good at everything girl. They basically kind of strike up a friendship, although it's a kind of weird one. And then things move on, time moves on, the world kind of almost ends in an extinction level event, and that's when things start to get kind of weird, to put it mildly. So you kind of reach this point where like the world is pretty screwed up. Mika herself basically dies, and then was it like hundreds of years, I think, she's like resurrected by her friend in...
It's only 30 years.
Only 30 years. I thought it was longer than that for some reason. So yeah, so basically she gets resurrected in what becomes like one of the hallmarks of this story in particular, but the book as a whole, in this terms of this really kind of really clinically described sort of body horror. So like Mika is brought back to life effectively as a brain just connected to a bunch of other people's organs just to kind of like sustain her, and it just becomes weirder and weirder. It's basically kind of her evolution as the state of this completely kind of screwed up planet changes. She kind of evolves and changes herself to survive in this world where most of the population has died out. What is left of the populace are kind of messed up in all kinds of physical and mental ways. And it just goes and goes. Like, it's sort of... I don't really know how to describe it. It reminds me, like, if anybody's ever played the game Paperclips Unlimited, it's kind of a bit like that. So, like, Paperclips Unlimited is a clicker game where you start off as just like some guy who runs a paperclip factory, and by the end of that game, you're turning all of the mass of the universe into paperclips, and there are invading aliens and all sorts of other weirdness. And it kind of reminded me a lot of that clicker game, because again, it starts out with this very simple, like, oh, here's a girl who wants to become an idol. And then it kind of becomes about traveling the length and breadth of the universe in just increasingly kind of bizarre ways, in what is just a flood of kind of scientific terminology, which again is all kind of very clinical. Yep. And written very factually. Like, it feels like this is written almost as a documentary. Like, it's just very much like, yeah, and then this is what happened. And that is kind of both a blessing and a curse, because, you know, it's part of kind of what makes the whole thing tick, is just this feeling that, like, no, this is kind of a considered scientific kind of evolution. But at the same time, it's like, it's kind of exhausting to read at some point, because it just goes, and it's just very, very dense for the entire time.
Yeah, the thing I will say for both this and the other stories, my first line of my notes, of which I took a lot, is the way I describe the way it describes everything, and also its prose, is vibrant and galloping. Like, it doesn't stop, it doesn't canter, it doesn't walk, it's just going. Like, it's going whether you like it or not. Which is kind of one of the things I like about it, because it never lets up. Because if it did let up, it would give you time to kind of stop, look around and go, wait a fucking minute, what the balls is this? You know, it's real. It has to keep going, because if it does stop, you're going to fall off the wagon real fast, because it's only momentum that's keeping you there. Even if, like, especially for this first story, I kind of fell off the wagon around like chapter 3 when it got really body horror-ish. Like the first 2, I was really on for it because I was really enjoying it. And then, man, what? Okay. But then, you know, the sheer momentum of it carried me through. But also just the sheer, like, the constant way of just going, yep, this is the way it is. Here's a bunch of descriptions I got from physics and Wikipedia. This is how it is. This is how it is. Now we're going to keep moving. And it's like, okay, Gengen Kusano, like, fucking go for it, mate. I will say, like, both this and the other stories have like a decent amount of physics and cosmology, which was my degree. And frankly, although you could pick it apart, he's kind of on the money, which is actually quite scary, being who I am and like having my like vaguely still working physics knowledge is like, oh no, yeah, this guy knows what he's on about. That's actually somehow worse.
Yeah, you see, that's one of the things I was wondering about, because like the book, certainly as somebody who, you know, just about scraped through his physics GCSE, like I totally bought into it because it's all done with such confidence of just like, yeah, and then this happened, and then then this was performed on this, and thus the result was whatever. And it's like, okay, you sound like you know what you're talking about. I'm sure some of this is probably nonsense, but you are telling it to me in a way that makes me believe that, yeah, sure, you've probably done some research or at least kind of know the vagaries of how this would work. And yeah, sure, okay, I believe you.
Yeah, I feel like the descriptions, especially when they're between two characters, are just long enough to be bearable. Like, I feel like if they tried to go too far into Ghost in the Shell style philosophical arguments, I would immediately close the book and never look back.
Yeah, again, it is that very much a scientific document. Like, it's not asking whether anybody should be doing any of this. It's like, yeah, this is what happens. So, like,
yeah, when the mask slip. Sorry, Andy.
So, yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, but so when the mask does slip or it shows its hand, it says, yeah, this is terrible. Like, this isn't actually a good thing, you know, but hey, this is the story. So that actually kind of helps.
Yeah.
in a weird way.
And a lot of that is just kind of very throwaway comments. I mean, one of the things that I do is sometimes the writing also gets weirdly obsessed with some tiny kind of side detail that is completely unimportant, but it just feels the need to mention. Like, there's a great point when kind of like humanity is basically the final remnants of humanity are kind of being extinguished, and the author just can't get past the fact that, like, oh yeah, and all the humans have to wear hats, and it just has to keep going back like several times. It's like, yeah, you know, they were trying their best, but they just had to wear these hats. And it's just like, it means it has absolutely no consequence on any of the big picture stuff that's happening, but it just really tickled me. It's just like, yeah, man, and those hats.
But I mean, Andy, let's face it, you know, if humanity was doomed, you'd still get bike shedding going on. Like, that's what humans would do in the face of apocalypse, is complain about what hats they're wearing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sure there would be, you know, many hot takes on the headwear in that kind of era. But yeah, I mean, I will say, like, out of the three stories, like, the one that probably worked the best for me is the second one, which
same.
For starters, like, I mean, it was really obvious from the get-go that it was kind of riffing on Kimono Friends as its starting point. And then, of course, when you get to the after, the author's like, yeah, I watched Kimono Friends, and, like, it got me thinking about this stuff. But basically, it's about a girl who gets completely obsessed with mobile games and gacha games. And she falls into a big hole of being obsessed with that. Of course, while she's playing said game on her way to the convenience store one day, she gets hit by a truck because she wasn't paying attention to where she was going. Yeah, which again is the most anime thing. But somehow she gets reincarnated in this weird kind of this alternate world that is also a gacha game, where she basically just starts off as like a single-celled organism and can like pick up cards to and pick up points to improve her body and, you know, survive and evolve. And like that was way more, that was kind of the most interesting one to me. Like, I really liked the way that went. Again, at some point I kind of started to zone out of it a little bit, because it kind of it went and went and went until, you know, the literal ends of the earth and the ends of the universe. But I really liked a lot of what that did for kind of a good 2/3 of it. Like, it was kind of smart in the way it built that up. It kind of added in other characters and the relationships between them, and like that was the most satisfying of the three for me. Like, that was the one that worked for me.
I just realized, did you trick me into reading an isekai work?
I mean, in a weird sort of way, that's exactly what it is. I mean, there were in that where I thought, like, yeah, this is kind of a little bit like So I'm a Spider, So What? Like, you know, you're dumped into this world with all these video game systems, and you have to kind of work out where they're at. And there's a point where she kind of can put points into an ability that kind of gives her like flavor text for everything, to let her figure out what stuff is. And it's just like, yeah, this feels a lot like So I'm a Spider, So What at this point. But then again, it kind of goes it goes off the map to a crazy degree. And again, there's a bit less body horror in this one, but there are certainly moments where I was just like, oh, this description is a little. I'm eating my toast while I'm reading this. This is a really bad idea.
Man, you messed up. I hope that toast didn't have jam on it.
Unfortunately, it did, which only made it worse. Like, this is a bad choice, a bad life decision.
I have messed up. Yeah. I really like that. I really like the second story, Evolution Girls, because like even the afterword, like when I was reading it, I thought, this feels like X meets Y, and then I read the afterword, and it's like, yeah, I thought about mixing X and Y, and I'm like, yep, knew it. I feel like all of them, especially the first two, kind of come from a place of being drowned in the anime pool, as it were, and kind of writing these Gonzo, but also kind of spiteful, but also lovingly so takes on them in these stories. Like in both cases, it shows a very keen understanding of what is happening, and the kind of subverting, but also just abusing conventions and normal pathways, and still ripping the piss out of it. So in the most loving way of like, hey, I play gacha games too. Wouldn't it be nice if we fucking didn't? So. Yeah, I mean, the Evolution Girls in particular does a thing that where it kind of gets to a point where it kind of realizes it's outstayed its welcome. Both the first two stories, in fact, I think the third one does it as well, where it gets to a point and it hangs around for about half a chapter too much, and then it goes, yeah, I should probably just pull the time skip lever, and then you go time skip to like another point later on, thankfully, which some of those skips are like overdue, some of which are like, whoa, okay, let's see what's happening now. And also both the first two stories have this commonality where like they're a flat circle. In fact, all three of them are like a flat circle. Like everything gets explained in a way where you get to the end and you go, fuck, you had this whole thing planned out, didn't you? Damn it. Like, you feel like you've had one pulled over on you because the author has just like quite looped everything around into this weird tight nugget of like weird Gonzo. I'm sorry, I used that word too much already, but like, everything has a reason and it's happy to point that out. And then you just are there going, shit, I've been got.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, given the similarities in sort of the way the all three of the stories kind of pan out, like I think probably the biggest disadvantage that we both had, and again, this was perhaps not the best time to pick this, is like we both read this book in incredibly short order, just like all three stories one after the other in a very short period of time. And I don't think that's the optimal way to read this book. Like certainly like the third story just kind of washed over me entirely, and I'm not sure that that's so much the fault of the story itself, so much of the fact that like it was the third one of those in 2 days, and I was just kind of like I'd had my fill of that conceit and that whole kind of way of dealing with the story, and so I was just kind of mentally checked out by that point. Whereas if you leave yourself a decent kind of air gap between each story and don't read them all in incredibly short order, your mileage may well vary, because I think you're best served giving yourself a bit of breathing space between each of these tales.
Yeah, I feel like I'm with you, Andy, because I read it in like a day and a half, and frankly, as you say, it kind of does the stories a disservice, because you get so into the mode of just reading one after another that like it is not this intense, but it feels like a game of Mad Libs, but with weirdo, sort of otaku bait words. The third one also, like Dark Seiyu, also has a ton of gross crap in it as well. Like the body horror is described just enough to be gross, but not enough for me to throw the book away, because I'm a very squeamish person. But yeah, the third story, Dark Seiyu, sorry, I'm taking over from you, but like, is basically, God. So Seiyu are a new word for these pseudo-humans who have a laryngeal sac, which can like vibrate at certain frequencies and create laser beams, and also manipulate electromagnetic fields to move spacecraft. And so basically Seiyu have become like a combination spacecraft / environment adjusting thing, and it's really bizarre. Like it kind of does like mock the whole Seiyu fandom, where it turns them into bizarro furniture who are shorn of any real like volition, but it also has a crazy cosmology back end to it, which like there is again in this one the end of the world, and it's real fucking wild, like real, like, I don't know, I feel like the author had that image in mind and then wrote the best they could about it, and then it's like, oh, we got the rest of the story. But also Dark Seiyu in particular, the worst main character, like not as in bad to read or bad as someone to read about, but just an reprehensible, awful creature, just a horrible person.
Yeah. Again, it's very much like there's a very clear kind of line of commentary there on, you know, kind of the idol industry, and that, you know, what you see is not necessarily what you get with idols. Or also hilariously kind of like makes use of the idea of yuri-baiting as this kind of like entire kind of social structure that idols must adhere to, and it's just like just seeing that kind of premise just dropped into the middle of all this weird sci-fi stuff. That did kind of amuse me a little bit. But yeah, like Dark Seiyu is kind of like Macross, but completely bonkers, I guess, at the end of the day. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's I almost wish that I'd kind of just like saved that particular story and read it a week later to see how it sat with me, because I did find myself kind of skipping over it almost somewhat and just kind of speed reading it, because it's like, yeah, like I know what the bit that this author is doing is now, and I kind of know how this goes, and it's really just a case of the exact steps it takes to get there. But perhaps in a fresher frame of mind, you know, I might have found a little bit more to enjoy. But yeah, certainly a good apocalypse in that one.
Yeah, the last third of Dark Seiyu I kind of slightly glazed over due to the same reasons of just like wanting to get the book done. If anything, because I wanted to like chew over the other parts of it for this podcast, because the whole thing was sitting heavy. You know, it was like eating a very big dinner and then still having more potatoes. And no, Granny, I don't want potatoes. No, Nan, no. You get the idea.
For sure. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's worth, it is certainly very much worth reading the author's notes at the end of the book. And
that's probably the secret fourth story is the author's notes.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically, it explains so much, because like the first thing he says is like, effectively, like the trouble with otaku is that they're not just nerds for one thing. They're usually nerds for a multitude of things, and they just want to smash them all together into like a single worldview. And that's basically what I did for all of these stories. So sorry. And it's
but
like,
that works because we know it as well, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, I mean, we live in a world where we both like Girls and Panzer because we are interested in the anime and also the tanks. It's like, we are guilty as charged.
Yep, certainly, definitely. But yeah, I feel like Dark Seiyu is a bit of a cleaner story, and I really like it, but would like it more if I had time to kind of stew on it on its own. I did like Evolution Girls because, you know, I'm a gacha slave. It's good fun. It takes all that and runs with it to the point where you're like, okay, yeah, that's had all of it wrung out. I'm done. Like, I don't need any more from that. So, but yeah, it's fascinating as well, because it does the one thing the author does across all stories is, like, it's clear there's a whole world beyond their short snippet, their novella look into it, but you don't need to know about any of it for this look. And also, you don't really want to, because it'll just weigh down the already quite heady and exhausting world you're being shuttled through very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I think hopefully, like, this is, I find myself kind of coming into this podcast like really not sure what I wanted to say about any of these stories, in terms of like, normally it's so easy, like, oh yeah, like I think you should read this because this is cool, or I don't think you should read this because it's trash. But this, like, I really don't know, but I hopefully, like, the discussion we've had will have given you things to pick up on, and you say, oh no, that sounds like something that I would hate, whether it's like the body horror or the weird kind of incessant hard sci-fi descriptions, or whether that's something like conversely you look at like, yeah, that's totally my bag. I will be in for that. So like, hopefully people will be able to figure out whether this is something that may interest them or not.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, and also as a way of trying to recommend it in a weird sort of like, but also accepting it's got loads of problems. Like, if you can deal with the body horror, if you can deal with the sort of bullshit technobabble, which, take it from an actual failed physicist, most of it checks out. Hell, Dark Seiyu is kind of legit at the end when they explain what the hell is going on. And the end of it is real wild. Like, I was expecting another chapter and there wasn't one. And I was like, what the... hang on, what? That's the end? Like, but it also makes sense, but it is still quite annoying. But yeah, one thing also that Dark Seiyu does is it has probably the best and least heavy-handed sort of diss on social media. which I'm not going to say anymore because when it happens, it's the best.
Yeah, that's actually really good. I mean, again, that's the weird thing about like I've talked about how clinical they all are in their language and how utterly focused on like the science and the kind of almost documentary style kind of retelling of them. But there are also some real good gags in all of these, like whether it's the aforementioned hat thing or like the some of the social media stuff in Dark Sayou. Like there's some actual good little snippets of comedy that kind of come out of that morass of kind of body horror and weird science.
Yeah, and the sheer absurdity. Like if you like the absurdity, you're well served here. But yeah, it reminded me, like, because I used to in my university years, I basically lived in the used bookstore and bought tons and tons and tons of pulpy sci-fi. You know, E. Doc Smith with his Lensman stories, his other stories he wrote, which are all hilarious to read now because holy shit, dude, could you be more passively sexist? Like basically, Lensman is the precursor to Star Wars in some way because some of the same ideas bleed through. But you know, Dark Sayou in particular, but also all three of them do take on this sort of pulpish, rompish, you know, writing for a magazine and needing your paycheck sort of angle to it, where like, hey, this story, I've started this story, it's got to end somehow, like, and all that, but with more nerdery. So yeah, I'm finding it hard to fully explain, but I enjoyed this book, but I do feel like I've taken some scars away from it. At the same time, if Gengen Kusuno releases anything else and it's translated, I'm probably going to queue up to read it because, yeah, fucking go for it, dude. Like, you clearly have more ideas than you actually know what to do with. So I'm happy to keep going. So yeah,
I'm curious to see what, if anything, he does next because like there's clearly something there, and I'd be interested to see him tackle something that's maybe from a slightly different angle or without the same kind of the same kind of general cadence of these stories. But yeah, I'll certainly be curious. It'll be a name that I keep an eye out for, if nothing else.
Yeah, as I say, the author's note is one of the most illuminating parts of it, which, they even say that, Gengen Kusuno has speed on their side. They can synthesize and, consume media and then synthesize it into a story fast. I'm like, yeah, that's the, the zeitgeist for anime, that's for sure. But yeah, man, that the thing, the twist or the crux in the creation of the first story, like, I know we hinted at the beginning, but don't spoil it for yourself. Like, go read the story and then find out about it because holy cow!
Yeah, it's on so many levels. It's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense, but also, oh my god.
Yeah, I basically I yelled so loud the cats got upset because I was like, what? Anyway, but yeah, that's Last and First Idol, a series of novellas. Unless you've got anything else to put on it before we go to questions.
No, nothing else to say.
Yeah, I gotta admit, it's in general you can boil it down to what the fuck. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Although, so we have a question from regular friend of the show at this point, Demel's Award. Quote, two questions here. Does Last and First Idol make you worry about the future of the human race and their gacha addictions? And yeah. But we have other bigger problems at the moment. I would be more worried about gacha. Hell, I looked at my own bank balance the other day and was worried about my bank balance in gacha. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like we have other things to be worrying about right now.
Yeah, I mean, also gambling has been an issue for as long as mankind itself. So in a weird way, it's not even a new problem. It's just kind of a different manifestation of a problem that has haunted humanity for a long, long time. So I mean, as long as there are no extinction level events that cause anything like Last and First Idol's craziness in my lifetime, I'll be quite happy because having read these novels, it's like, yeah, I kind of don't want the world to end anytime soon in any of these scenarios.
Yeah, but yeah, the gacha. The thing about gambling in particular, hey, at least I've got an anime JPEG to show for it instead of a copy of the Racing Post. Oh, that's sad. That's a real low bar. Christ. Okay, and which story ended up your favorite? For me, it was Evolution Girls. The premise of it got a bit thin towards the end, and it kind of. But equally, I enjoyed the ride. The final, the quote unquote final battle against the whatever the dick they fought was real crazy. Although it went a bit long and gross. But fascinating.
Yeah, likewise for me. Evolution Girls was the best one, and also perhaps looping us back into the first question. I did find myself reading through that, being actually, this would actually make kind of an interesting gacha game. Somebody should probably make this thing.
Oh no, it would. That's the scary part. Also, what the fuck kind of premium gacha gives you normals? What the fuck? Evolution Girls sucks. Don't put normals in the paid gacha.
Yeah, it's much like life itself, I guess. Sometimes you get a bad hand.
Yeah, but anyway, that's God, what weird. But that's Last and First Idol. Jesus. So with that, we can talk about what we're talking about next time. So as mentioned, October is a complete hell month, especially for Andy, and so I have drafted in a guest host for next time. For who I'm going to splice in his audio or bit of audio with what he's chosen, because he's still deciding. For me, I am picking the first volume of Gundam The Origin. It is, I think, a 12-volume work released by Vertical. It's in hardback, physical only, but if you want to read it week by week, you can read it on Comic Walker, and it's one of the 3 or so series they actually keep updating, and so a good chunk of it is available there for free to read in browser. They've taken down their iOS and Android apps because I launched them and it said, hey, this hasn't been active for a year, and I went, oh, that fair. Gundam The Origin is available to read for free on the internet legally, so that's why I'm going to be reading it, because I ain't buying a physical book. And whatever Pat chooses will be spliced in here. Okay? And so moving on to one of the last things, what's coming up in the world of manga? Looking at the release list. So the day this releases, the 16th of October, the second volume of the Voynich Hotel comes out. So I'm probably going to get it to see what the hell happens next.
Yeah, likewise here. So expect some kind of returning champion segment at some point, because I suspect we'll probably both want to talk about that.
Yep. Also coming out on the 23rd of October is a somewhat shameful series, I suppose, but whatever, is Plus-Sized Elf, which is basically about an elf lass who comes from a different world and comes into the human world and discovers she really likes French fries and eats too many and gets a bit tubby and then needs help to slim down so she can get back to the elf land. It's basically like cards on the table. It's comedic. It's funny. It's basically a story written and drawn by a former hentai artist who likes his characters a bit on the tubby side. And so basically this entire manga is as close as you can get to being ecchi without going over the edge. But I don't know. For me, I kind of like it because it has its heart in the right place with the characters. It's not mean or spiteful. It's kind of cute, but again, it's very much this guy's thing, as it were.
Yeah, that sounds like a series that could go wrong in so many ways. So it sounds kind of it's kind of grateful that it doesn't go in any of the obvious directions.
Yeah, it could very easily do so. I know that it's gone a few volumes in Japan, and the author hasn't been arrested yet, so probably a good sign. But it's real funny whenever people take a liking to a series, and then on Twitter they go, "Wait, this guy drew porn?" And it's like, dude, everyone fucking draws porn. It's manga. Yeah.
It's usually just a case of how overt they are about it, or whether they just hide it behind various pseudonyms.
Yeah, I mean, hell, the author of Yotsuba at one point drew porn. That's not a surprise. Oh yeah, quick side note. One thing about Last and First Idol I wanted to run past you. I've forgotten his name, but the guy who directed Tatami Galaxy.
Masaki Yuasa, yeah.
Get Masaki Yuasa to direct an animated OVA of one of these stories.
I mean, I was going to say no, why would you do that? And then I remembered Devilman Crybaby. It's oh yeah, he should totally do that.
Yeah, imagine how much he can just go to the wall for all the crazy descriptions. Man,
yeah, that would be something.
Yeah, I mean, Mind Game was already wild enough. Christ. Cool. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. This has been your episode of Screentone Club. You can find this and other episodes on screentone.club. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbay, I think. If you like the podcast, please tell a friend, tweet about it, let people know you're listening to it. That stuff is really big and helps in a massive organic way, getting more people to listen. If you can stomach it and you're feeling kind, a rating and a review on your pod service of choice is magnificent. Thank you very much if you have done it. I know some of you have. If you want to catch up with us on Twitter, you can. The Twitter handle is @Screentone Club. We post pictures and we've started trying to be more, interactive on there. You can also email us at show@screentone.club. That will shove it straight into a folder labeled email for us. And so personal stuff. My name is Elliot Page. You can find me at Elliot Page on Twitter, although I'm taking a break because the world's a bit wild. Also coming back up by the time this show releases will be the manga search engine, Manga Search, Manga SEAR.ch, which I've nearly got working on a whole new tech stack. And so you can use it to find legal sources for manga digitally available to you in the UK. So I've nearly just about got that working again, thank Christ. And sorry about that, Andy, how about you?
Yeah, so my name is Andy Hanley, and you can probably find me sobbing in a corner for much of the next month. But I'm also available on Twitter at Hannahs1979.
Cool. So, yeah, as again, thank you everyone who's checked out the Patreon. It means the world to us. And thank you everyone just for listening. Hope you have a lovely week. So, from us, good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.